Okay, folks, so first of all, just to begin with, we would like to say a huge thank you for the invitation to come, for lovely hospitality from Dave and Avril and Amy, and just for that sense of welcome. It's probably been about 7 years since we were here. We remember being here very clearly. You don't remember us, I'm sure, but the last time we were here, at that time I was an elder in Korean Baptist. We were in vacancy. And your previous pastor, Richard, was being installed, and we came to bring greetings and wish you well as a church at the beginning of his ministry. And at that particular time, our first time here, it was such a privilege to be here to get to know so many of you. And we fully intended to return much quicker. But lots of things have happened in the last 7 years to you and to us. And it wasn't possible for us. No. However, here we are. And in the meantime, of course, our daughter Lisa and our son-in-law Mark Muirhead have been here a couple of summers to do by teams with you. And so we've had updates about how things were. And we need to say thank you to you, because the church fellowship here were a massive encouragement to them and a real help to them, a formative, encouraging help to a young couple. And just by the by, they've had a little one now, a little granddaughter, our first grandchild, Lois. She's about 14 months. And like any proud grandparents, if you're interested, we have photographs and videos on our phone at the end at coffee time. Happy, always happy to share. So we haven't been here very often, but we know this is a special place, and we want you to be encouraged in the Lord. We bring love and best wishes from Lisa and Mark.
Yes.
And we also bring greetings from the church family in Korean Baptist. We have, as I said, been in vacancy. We have a pastor now for a couple of years, and we're encouraged. But we will be keeping you in our prayers in your vacancy. This is a time when the Lord is going to be at work with you, in you, through you, preparing you for a new ministry in his time, and we will keep you in our prayers for that. So we're going to turn to God's Word.
Yep.
Melanie's going to read for us, and I am going to set my Bible and get sorted.
Okay.
So we're reading from John, Gospel of John, chapter 2, and verses 1 to 11.
Yeah. So starting at verse 1 and then just stopping at verse 11. Okay. So the title in my Bible is Jesus Changes Water into Wine. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Amen.
Thank you, Melanie. Not sure about you, but for me, there are passages in the Bible and stories in the Bible that at times, if I'm honest, I have wondered, why are they there? I know that and I'm rejoiced that the Bible is God's authoritative word, but there have been some passages and some stories, and I thought, what's the significance of this? Why is this there? And for me, this is one of those stories. I'll say a little bit more about why. I'll explain that a little bit more later on, but this has been one of those where I have wondered in years gone by, what's the significance of this little story? So we're going to have a look at this this morning. We're going to hopefully roll up our sleeves, as it were, and delve into the details of this story. And let's see what God has to say to us through it. It's in John's Gospel, and as you probably know, John's Gospel is slightly different from the other three Gospels. A different approach, a different slant. John brings, at times, a very personal insight into the things that Jesus said and did. There's a depth, there's a detail, there's sometimes a subtlety even. It's more than just recounting events. There's a closeness in some of the accounts that we read in John, and an insight that he brings. And I hope that we find that in this very simple little story of the wedding at Cana. We trust that the Lord will help us as we open his word. So let's set the scene. Jesus has been further south. He's been further south where there are a lot more people. In his day, the sophisticated south, nearer Jerusalem. He's had a couple of encounters with his cousin John the Baptist. Many people have been drawn together through John's ministry of repentance and baptism. And Jesus has been there. He's called the first few of his disciples. And then he's decided to come back up north to the less sophisticated, more rural north where there are less people. We've kind of gone the opposite way, haven't we? We came down from the less sophisticated north yesterday down to you. But Jesus decides to go back up north to Galilee, where he was brought up. That's what he's done. And when he's there, there's a wedding. Okay, so he's there and there's a wedding. Now, there's not a huge amount known for sure about the format of a Jewish wedding in those days, so I'm told. But we do know certain things. It was important. It was an important celebration. It was an important social occasion. It was an important religious event before God, okay? And it was an important opportunity to share hospitality, to share a feast, a time of celebration and eating and drinking together with family and friends. Of course, particularly important for the couple being married, for their families, and for their friends and neighbours. So we know that, just like today, there would have been lots of planning would have gone in to a wedding in that day. And there would have been lots of planning for this wedding. Everyone hopes that a wedding goes smoothly. It's exactly the same today. No one wants a hitch at a wedding, except for one. Isn't that right? Now, if my sons were here, they'd be going, "Oh, Dad, for goodness sake, that's just not funny." Anyhow, so we know that the wedding is at Cana. Now, there's a little bit of debate about where Cana actually was. When you look at some maps in the Bible, they have a dot and it says Cana. But as far as I read, there are a couple of Arab towns today. And it could have been one or other of those. Slightly north, so we have Nazareth in the south of Galilee. As far as the sophisticated people in Jerusalem were concerned, Nazareth was next to nowhere. It was so far north and so far from civilization. And then Cana could have been 5 miles northeast of Nazareth, or it could have been about 8 miles due north of Nazareth. So it's even further north than Nazareth, even further up into Galilee, even further away from civilization. It would have been a small place. It was in the foothills in Galilee, not even on a major road or route. So there's a wedding. It's at Cana in this little place. And then guests. We know that Mary, Jesus' mother, was there. And we know that Jesus and his disciples had been invited. So here we have Jesus just on the brink of his ministry. Just on the brink. And he he leaves the more populated areas. He leaves, if you like, an already prepared large audience of people to preach to who'd come because of John's ministry. He goes further north, away from civilization, away from major population, away from religious center in Jerusalem, and yet it's the beginning of his ministry. And he takes time to attend a wedding in a little place called Cana. Is it just me, or does it seem as though in this story that Jesus has been sidetracked from his main mission? Is it just strange that he comes away and he attends this event? I don't know. It seems odd. And yet we know that everything that he did with purpose. So we're going to delve into the details of the story and see what God has to say. I want to look at it just under 3 headings. Very simple. First of all, I want to look at the ordinary people in the story. And then I want to look at the extraordinary Jesus in the story. And then to finish with, briefly, the extraordinary results. So first of all, the ordinary people. Let's have a look and see what we're told. Now, when I use the term ordinary, I don't mean to be demeaning. We're all ordinary. But what I mean is the ordinary flesh and blood human beings. We all are. And those folks in the story are important. They're mere mortals, but they play a role in this story that really matters. So let's begin with Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus. So, at this stage, Mary's probably in her mid-40s. She's probably a widow because we don't hear anything of Joseph from this point on in Jesus' ministry from age 30 onwards. So she's probably a widow, probably in her mid-40s. She's raised her family. She's probably had 6 or 7 children. And they're probably now in adult or young adulthood. They're probably independent, but she's raised her family. There's no doubt that if all of that is true, Mary in that day and in that culture has been a woman of fortitude. She's been a woman of experience. She's respected in the community. Perhaps that's why she was invited to the wedding, or perhaps she's a relative of the family or one of the families or a friend. This is Mary. But also we know about Mary that she will be carrying in her heart significant memories of events and encounters in early life before, during, and after the birth of her firstborn, Jesus. Mary has had rich experience, and I have no doubt that she's someone within that area who is respected. She knows what was prophesied about her son, and she knows what was announced to her about him. And Jesus is her eldest. He's a man of about 30. And if it's true then that Mary's a widow, Jesus has become the man of the house. And so there she is with her eldest son. She will have relied on him. She'll have leaned on him heavily to help her to provide for and bring up the rest of the family. And yet she knows she cannot keep him. She knows that he has come as God's chosen one and that he has come on a mission. No doubt the details of how that mission will unfold are not yet fully clear to her. But she knows that the one that she has leant on and been there for her, she will have to relinquish. And then there's a problem. So here we have this wedding. Mary is there. Jesus is there with the first of his disciples. The guests are there. It's a wonderful time of celebration. And then a problem. And as we read in the story, the festivities are in full swing, and perhaps the servants go to get some more wine and discover there's none left. How could that be? For the hosts in that day, this is awful. in our day, if you'd put time into preparing and planning a wedding and something happened and the meal wasn't available, you would be mortified for those you'd invited. But in that day, socially, that was a big deal. And how could that be? Had the guests consumed more than usual? Were they bigger drinkers than they expected? Were there more guests? We don't really know. But whatever the reason, this was terrible. The people might think that the family had been too miserly to provide enough for the guests. Or they might think that they hadn't put enough thought into their preparations. But either way, that would have been regarded as shameful, as a sign of disrespect for the importance of the occasion, a sign of disrespect for the guests. This was a problem. Now, the fact that Mary knows about this almost before anyone else is a sure sign that she's trusted by the family. This problem, this disaster, hasn't been shared, even with the master of the banquet, the man who would have had the role of kind of emceeing and coordinating everything. It hasn't even been shared with him. And yet Mary has been trusted with that knowledge. It perhaps shows that she's one of those go-to people. We all know people like that. If there's a problem, I need to go and see so-and-so. They're steady. They'll know what to do. Mary has been trusted with this information. Certainly she must have been regarded as someone with discretion to share something so embarrassing so quickly. And so, what is Mary's immediate response? She goes to Jesus. Her immediate response, she takes this problem to him. She doesn't have a solution, but she goes to him. She knows him. She knows him perhaps better than anyone else, humanly. And he's her go-to. I can learn so much from that. Mary knows him. She has relationship. She has experienced Jesus in all of life's situations. She knows him to be practical. He's a carpenter or a builder. The word can mean either. Following in his Father's footsteps. He's resourceful. He's trustworthy. And he has a heart of real care. And so she knows, even with something so sensitive and potentially shameful, he's the first person she can go to. And we can all learn a lot from that. That sounds lovely. But listen to Jesus' response to his loving mother. He says, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." Is that not a bit of a shock? It almost feels, certainly to our Western ears, it feels like a bit of a slap in the face to his loving mother. How could that be? Given all that we've just said, you'd expect Jesus to say something like, "Not a problem, Mum, leave it with me." And yet he says that. So was he a bit grumpy? Had she taken him by surprise? Was he annoyed because he was enjoying his meal, like many of us men do, and didn't want to be disturbed? But we know that nothing takes Jesus by surprise. He would have known about this problem long before anyone else. So we have to say no, not grumpy. No, not about the meal. No, not taken by surprise. When Jesus says woman to his mother, to us that sounds harsh. In that day, no. In that day, no. That was a term of respect. It was actually a dignified thing to say. And in case we're in any doubt about that, my mind goes to another time when Jesus calls his mother woman. I'm sure you remember. He's on the cross. He's dying. And he looks down and he sees his mum and he says, "Woman, behold your son." He looks at her with love in his eyes and he calls her woman. There is no harshness in that term. On the cross, Jesus looks at her and she looks at him, and you can only imagine what that must have been like for her. And yet, even though he's in agony, he's providing for her, saying, "Woman, behold your son." And to John, the writer of this, to John, "Son, behold your mother. Look after my mother." There's no lack of love in Jesus calling his mother woman. There's bond, love, respect, dignity, and practical care. So Mary looks into the eyes of her son at this wedding. She comes to him with this problem. She loves him. She loves him so much. She trusts him. She has lent on him many times before. She comes to him with a problem, and he says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" And he's looking at his mum, and he knows how much he has trusted God in the difficult times, right from before he was born. And he loves her dearly. And yet he says, "Why do you involve me? My time has not yet come." But we know that Jesus is not unwilling to help. What is he doing? I think he's doing what he does for us. When we come to him in prayer because we have a problem, a heartfelt problem, the Lord does far more than simply answer our prayers. If we trust him and come to him in prayer, the Lord teaches us. He molds us as we come to him in prayer. And Jesus is reminding his mum that he hasn't been sidetracked in Cana, so far from Jerusalem and the temple in his mission. He hasn't taken time out to attend this little wedding in a backwater town. He's on a mission. And the priorities of his mission for God will always come first. He's not there to attract attention to himself. He's not there to draw a crowd. That time will come. He's on a mission. And so as Mary comes with her problem, heartfelt, and she brings it to her son, he feels that problem too. He loves his mum, and his heart desires to help, and as we know, he will. But he also wants to teach her. There's a lovely message there for all of us, that when we come to God in prayer, we come with burdens and concerns, and we all have them. And we can trust Jesus with all of those. But he'll do far more than simply answer our prayers and help us with our burdens. As he does that, he will teach us. He will mold us. He will help us to see the priorities of God's kingdom. And he will help us to serve God's purposes. Coming to God in prayer opens our eyes, the eyes of our hearts, to who he is, what his desires are for us, and how we can walk with him to meet his purposes. This is what he does for Mary. And just in case we're in any doubt that Mary has been in some way put down or discouraged, then we hear what she says next. Jesus says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" But Mary's words immediately after to the servants are, "Do whatever he tells you." I love that. She looks into his eyes and she knows him. And she knows he can be trusted. And we don't hear another thing from Mary in that story. And I think that's lovely. You know, I'm not sure what your role in life is. My role was a teacher, even worse than that, a head teacher. You know, if anybody asks me now, what was your job? I usually say I worked in a school, and hope they don't ask the next question. Because if they've children and you say, I was a head teacher, the children go, you know, and that's it, relationship over. Anyway, I was a head teacher, and one of the things I was terrible at the beginning anyway, was delegating. Oh, delegating. I would ask somebody to do something, but I kind of couldn't leave them alone. You know, I just needed to check, and I was telling myself it was because I cared about them, and I didn't want to burden them, but I kept getting involved, and I wasn't trusting them to get on and do. And that was a lesson for me I had to learn over years. What I love about this, Mary says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. And we don't hear another word from her. She doesn't micromanage. She doesn't keep dipping in and out. She doesn't try to make her own suggestions to Jesus about how to resolve the problem. I'm sure she has no idea what he's going to do. But she says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. In other words, he is able. I trust him. Do whatever he says. Isn't there a massive lesson for us in that? Okay. So the ordinary people, Mary's the big one. And then the servants, the other ordinary people who have this role, the servants themselves. Let's think about the servants. Well, first of all, what do we not know about the servants? Well, we don't know their names. We don't know whether they were male or female. We don't know their ages. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know their abilities. We don't know their personalities. We don't know how many there were. There's so many things we don't know about the servants. But listen to what we do know. Here's what we do know about them. In other words, here's what God wants us to notice about the servants in this story. Firstly, they were available. They were where they were meant to be. They were there to serve, and when they were looked for, they were there. They were obedient. They did exactly what Jesus asked them to do. They were diligent. Jesus said to them, fill those jars with water. What does the Bible say they did? They filled them, I love this, to the brim. They filled them to the brim. 20 to 30 gallons. They didn't sort of, I don't know why we're doing this, and just sort of half or 3/4 filled them. They filled them to the brim. They were diligent. And lastly, they were compliant. They were compliant. They responded without question, without complaint, to everything that Jesus asked them to do. And I'm not sure if you put yourself in their shoes or their sandals, another dad joke, you've just filled these large jars with water from the well. You know it was water because you filled them. And now Jesus simply says, draw some out and take it to the master. I don't know if one of them did that or two of them did that, but you can imagine you're drawing out water that you just filled from the well to take to the master of the feast when there's no wine. I mean, you'd be thinking, what is the point? And whenever I do this, I'm getting the sack. I'm not going to get paid for my day, or I'm going to be made a fool of. But they were compliant. They were obedient. We know that about them. We're told so little in one way about these servants, and yet we're told a massive amount about what it means to serve Jesus, to be where we're needed, wherever that is, to obey God's instructions without complaint, to be diligent in the large tasks and the small, and not requiring to be named, not even requiring to be noticed, and trusting God for the outcomes. I'm not sure if you've ever wondered in this story. I sometimes would have wondered, when they put the water into the jars, did it become wine as it hit the jar? Or did it become wine when Jesus said, now draw the water out? Suddenly, was all the water wine? Or did it become wine as it was drawn out? Did they see water and then when they drew out, it became wine? Or was it wine whenever the master received it and actually took the first sip? I've no idea. But we often, if we're serving God, we know what he wants us to do. We don't know the details, the outcomes necessarily. And yet to be good servants, we trust him, and we trust him for the outcomes because we know him. And this is part of how the Lord molds us to trust him and serve him without needing always to know the details of the outcomes. So, ordinary people, Mary and the servants. We have so much to learn from them. And now, extraordinary Jesus. When we read about what Jesus says to the servants, and this is where I've struggled with this story in some ways. It's so simple. He just says, fill the jars with water. And when that's done, he just says, now draw some out and take it to the master. It's just so ordinary, if you pardon that expression. This story, and I said I'd tell you a bit more about my struggle with it. I remember years back, we were involved in Holiday Bible Club work with children for a long time. Many, many memories. Back in the Stone Age, as my children would say. And I remember one week that we were doing, and this story was one of those to be taught to the children. And I would have done a lot of work with primary kids. That was my job, and I did a lot of work in speaking to kids and enjoyed that. But I really struggled with this story. Now, you might wonder why. Well, let me tell you. See, in this story, there's neither lion nor bear, soldier, battle. There's no storms. There's not even a great big fish. There's not even a giant. It's so ordinary. Fill the jars. Now draw some out and take it to the master. It's so simple. And I really struggled with this at one point. How to teach this to the children and really get from it what God was saying. But isn't the simplicity, isn't the ordinariness the point? Jesus Christ is extraordinary, but not because he has wow factor magic skills. Not because he needs some special words that nobody else knows, some form of words that's a special spell, some fancy tricks, doesn't even need to raise his voice. Jesus is extraordinary because of who he is. Just want to turn back one chapter to John 1. And we know these words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And down to verse 14, John writes this: the Word became flesh, Jesus, the living Word of God, and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The point is, Jesus doesn't need fancy tricks. He doesn't need special effects. He doesn't need magic words. He doesn't need special gestures. He is the power of God. He is the living Word. What Jesus says happens. And so it's the very ordinariness and simplicity that allows us to see the extraordinary Jesus. And that's true in our lives. We can trust in him for everything. He has his hands on us if we're his. We were thinking about this, Melanie and I, just yesterday in our little time together. And we were thanking God because his hands are all over our lives, our marriage, our children, their children, our church, our hopes and dreams for the future we don't know the details of. If you're Jesus' child, his hands, his fingerprints are all over you. And that's special because he is the living word and the power of God for his purposes in your life. The ordinariness, the simplicity of the story is the point because it's Jesus who's extraordinary. So he's the one who has the power to transform the water into the wine. He doesn't need to bring power. He is the power. He doesn't need to bring light. He is the light. He is the life. And so when Jesus speaks, it is so. He changes water into wine in this story. He changes darkness into light in our lives. He brings new out of old, life from death. Those without hope, he provides with eternal hope, filled with it to the brim and overflowing. One of the most dramatic, ordinary changes I've read in the Bible is the one that happens on the cross. The Lord Jesus is dying, and the thief beside him, one of the thieves, simply says to him, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus simply says, truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus speaks, and a man who's a dying criminal with no hope is transformed, is changed in an instant from death to life to someone who will be welcomed forever into the kingdom of God. And today Jesus is the same. He is able to change hearts and lives. When we accept our need for him, we ask for his forgiveness. This is what the thief was doing. We recognize that he alone is the king. This is what the thief was saying. And we realize that we need Jesus to remember us, to forgive us, and to welcome us. Then that's exactly what he does. He's extraordinary with a word. And then finally, the extraordinary results. Well, the results in the story are pretty obvious, aren't they? There was a major crisis, but the embarrassment of the whole thing was avoided. Water was changed into wine, not just wine, but best quality vintage, probably the best wine in the world. That's another dad joke. The wedding celebrations continue. Probably almost everybody was completely unaware of what had happened. It's just so straightforward. The bridegroom and the family hailed the master, tastes the wine, and is blown away by their generosity that they're serving such high quality wine. Partway through, this is unheard of. The bridegroom, the family, they gain respect for the generosity of this. Notice the one person who doesn't get any credit for this is Jesus. But that's who he is. He doesn't need to find glory in this. He doesn't need to find glory in this because he is glory. He already is the personification of the glory of God. And so he doesn't need that. Jesus doesn't get any of the credit. Okay, so that's a big result. But in the story, the biggest, most extraordinary result is not the water into wine, but it's found in the last verse. And the last verse that Melanie read for us is verse 11. And I'll read it again. It says this. It says this. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs. John often calls the miracles signs. They're signposts to who Jesus is. The first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. And listen to this. And his disciples believed in him. That's the extraordinary result. I mean, water into wine is a way beyond anything we could ever imagine. It's extraordinary. But the real extraordinary result, these disciples he had just called, they saw a glimpse of his glory and their hearts were changed. Believing faith. Now, as we read on through the story, we know the disciples make mistakes. They doubt, they fail, they fall. We know that. Well, I don't know about you, but I've been a Christian for quite a long time, and I believed in Jesus, and it was decades ago. In my journey, I have doubted, and I have failed, and I have fallen. But I did believe, and he did change me, and I'm on a journey, and he's molding me. So let's not judge the disciples because of that. But here's the beginning of faith in their hearts. Why? Because they saw his glory. And I guess if we want to be able to call ourselves God's children, for our hearts to be changed, we need to see Jesus for who he really is. This was the beginning for them. Yes, it was extraordinary that water was turned into wine. Amazing. And a sign of Jesus' practicality and care for that family and that couple. A sign that he lives in the real world. He understands the real pressures and concerns that we have. But the real extraordinary result, his disciples get a glimpse of who he is, the first glimpse of who he really is, and their hearts are changed. And for us, when we get that glimpse of Jesus and we realize what we need from him, forgiveness and remembrance, acceptance, then God changes our hearts and we have saving faith. We can believe in him, trust in him for everything and for our future. Let's pray that for each of us that would be true. And as we see him, as we believe in him, he walks with us through that journey. And we have that hope that the dying thief had, that one day he will welcome us into his kingdom forever. Let's bow and let's pray. Sovereign Lord and our Heavenly Father, we thank you for Jesus. We thank you for the wonder it is that we have your word to teach us about him. We thank you for your amazing grace that you sent him to be your living word here on earth. We thank you for how you revealed yourself through him. And we thank you that as we gaze at him, as we see his glory, you're willing to change our hearts, to change us from death to life, to give us new birth in Jesus. And having done that, to keep us, as you did for his disciples, to hold us, to walk with us through the journey of life, and to give us assurance of a hope that will become reality in eternity, in your kingdom. Father, as we bow before you, each of us bows living in different circumstances, living with different concerns, burdens, anxieties, challenges. And Father, as we do that, help us, each one, to come to Jesus. Help us to know him and trust him. And as we bring our lives to you, we ask that not only would you help us resolve issues, but would you mold us? Would you change us? Would you grow us as we live in trust and in faith with you? We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.